She wasn't supposed to be there. Everyone knew that the moment she stepped out of the car, the photographer's cameras stopped clicking. Conversations died mid-sentence. And the woman in white, the one who'd sent the invitation, went pale as a ghost. Because the janitor they'd invited as a joke, the one they planned to parade in front of 300 guests as their charity case, their good deed for the year, had just walked into their gala wearing a $40,000 gown. But that wasn't the part that made the room freeze. What froze the room was the moment someone recognized her face. And what happened next destroyed a marriage, ended a career, and reminded an entire city that the people you overlook are sometimes the ones who've accomplished more than you ever will. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. You're going to want to remember this one. The envelope sat on her lap like evidence at a crime scene. Cream-colored, heavy stock, gold calligraphy that spelled her name Claudine in letters that looked like they cost more than her weekly paycheck. She'd been staring at it for 20 minutes in the break room of Sterling and Associates, her cleaning cart parked beside the vending machine, her rubber-soled shoes still damp from mopping the executive floor. An invitation to a charity gala from them. The hum of the building surrounded her phones, ringing 42 floors above, elevators chiming, the distant echo of important people doing important things. She'd been invisible in this place for 7 years. A ghost in a blue uniform who emptied trash bins and scrubbed toilets and polished glass until it looked like there was no barrier between the world inside and the world outside. Most people didn't see her. They stepped around her like furniture, talked through her like air. Sometimes they'd place coffee cups on her cart without even looking at her face, assuming she'd take care of it. Because that's what invisible people do. They take care of things. But this invitation changed everything. She opened it slowly. Inside, gold lettering was announced. The Crystal Pavilion. White tie elegance. Benefiting underprivileged individuals. Below that, handwritten inexpensive ink. We thought you'd be the perfect special guest. Claudine's hands didn't shake. Not yet. But something cold moved through her chest, spreading like frost across glass. This wasn't kindness. She knew that immediately. You don't work 7 years in a building full of ruthless people without learning to recognize cruelty wearing a smile. This was a theater, a setup. They were going to parade her in front of their wealthy friends, point to the poor janitor they'd saved with their generosity, and feel good about themselves while she stood there, humiliated, reduced to proof of their charity. She thought about refusing, throwing the invitation away, pretending it never happened. But then she thought about the woman who'd sent it. Maria, the CEO's wife, 20 years younger than her husband, beautiful in that sharp, untouchable way, and cruel like some people are cruel casually, reflexively, like cruelty was just part of breathing. She once told Claudine, "Don't touch that. Your hands might leave marks." Like Claudine's hands were dirty by nature. Like poverty was contagious. If Claudine didn't go, Maria would tell everyone the janitor was too scared, too ashamed, too aware of her place to accept charity. If she did go, they'd spend the whole night laughing at her. Either way, they won. Except, Claudine stood up slowly, folded the invitation, and slipped it into her pocket. Her reflection stared back at her from the break room window, 45 years old, tired eyes, faded uniform, hair pulled back in a practical bun. But reflections can be deceiving, because what they didn't know, that nobody in this building knew, was that the woman they'd been stepping around for 7 years, the one they treated like she was nobody, like she'd always been nobody, like she'd been born to scrub their floors and clean their messes. She'd once had the world at her feet, and maybe, just maybe, it was time they remembered. Sun hadn't fully risen when Claudine pushed through the service entrance of Sterling and Associates. The building stood like a glass monument against the purple sky, 42 stories of steel and ambition reaching toward clouds that didn't care. Inside, the lobby gleamed with the kind of perfection that required constant maintenance. Marble imported from Italy, chandeliers that cost more than houses. Everything polished, everything pristine, everything designed to remind you that this was a temple of success and not everyone was worthy to worship here. Claudine moved through the corridors like smoke. Silent, unnoticed. Her cart rolled on wheels she'd oiled herself so they wouldn't squeak. She knew the building's rhythm better than anyone. 6 a.m., the early executives arrived, already on their phones, already conquering. 7:30, the assistants flooded in, clutching overpriced coffee, repeating phrases they'd heard their bosses say. By 8, the tower was fully alive, buzzing with deals and deadlines, and the particular energy of people who believed their time was worth more than other people's lives. She cleaned the boardroom on the 14th floor first. Leather chairs are still warm from yesterday's meeting. Whiteboards covered in projections and profit margins. Half-empty bottles of imported water left carelessly on tables that cost what she earned in 3 months. She wiped down every surface, emptied every trash bin, erased every trace that human beings had been there. That was her job. Make everything look untouched. Make herself disappear in the process. People passed her constantly. Men in suits tailored to their exact measurements. Women in heels that clicked authority with every step. They walked past her like she was furniture. Sometimes they walked through her personal space without even a glance, as if she'd simply materialized somewhere else to accommodate them. A few offered tight, obligatory smiles, the kind you give to service workers when you remember you're supposed to be polite. But most didn't see her at all. She was the help, the invisible labor that kept their world spinning. The hierarchy was clear, unspoken, absolute. Executives on the top floors, management in the middle, support staff below, and then, far beneath everyone else, the cleaners, the janitors, the people who touched what others refused to touch, who saw what others chose to ignore. Claudine had learned to navigate it all without making waves. Head down. Work steady. Don't speak unless spoken to. It was survival, not submission. At least that's what she told herself on the hard days. Then came the moment that would change everything. She was polishing the glass conference table on the 20th floor when Maria swept in, trailing perfume that probably cost more than Claudine's monthly rent. Maria didn't work there. She didn't need to. She was married to Walter, the CEO, and that was her entire resume. Young, beautiful, and cruel in the way people become when they've never been told no. Maria stopped, looked at Claudine's reflection in the glass, and her lip curled slightly. "Excuse me," Maria said, her voice sharp and cold. "Don't touch that. Your hands might leave marks." Claudine froze, rag in hand, staring at the woman whose face she'd only seen in company newsletters and executive holiday cards. Maria's eyes swept over her dismissively, the way you'd look at a stain you're deciding whether to bother cleaning. "Actually," Maria added, stepping closer, "maybe you should just work around me. I'm meeting someone important here, and I'd rather not have distractions." Distractions. That's what Claudine was. Not a person, not even an inconvenience. Just a distraction. Something in the way. Claudine carefully set down her rag, picked up her supplies, and moved toward the door. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, just left, as invisible as she'd arrived. But as she walked away, something inside her cracked. Just a little. Just enough to let a dangerous thought slip through. How much longer can I keep disappearing? The sound hit first high-pitched laughter echoing down the corridor like breaking glass. Claudine recognized it immediately. Maria's voice, louder than necessary, performing for an audience. She didn't look up from the window. She was wiping, but her shoulders tensed. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't be good. Maria rounded the corner with 3 women flanking her like accessories. Designer handbags swinging, heels striking marble in perfect rhythm. They were laughing at something, heads tilted back, mouths wide, the kind of laughter that announced itself, that demanded attention. When they spotted Claudine, the laughter shifted and became sharper, more pointed. Conspiratorial. Claudine kept wiping, kept moving her cloth in steady circles. Invisible. That was the goal. Always invisible. But Maria wasn't having it. "Claudine!" Her voice rang out, sweet as honey laced with arsenic. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." The lie was obvious. Maria had never looked for her. Not once in 7 years. Claudine turned slowly, meeting Maria's eyes. The other women crowded closer, forming a semicircle, blocking any easy escape. They were grinning like children about to pull wings off a butterfly. Maria held something between her perfectly manicured fingers, a cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive, the kind that whispered privilege before you even opened it. She extended it toward Claudine with exaggerated ceremony, as if presenting a royal decree. "I have something special for you," Maria announced, her voice carrying down the hallway. "Walter and I are hosting a charity gala this Saturday at the Crystal Pavilion. It's for underprivileged individuals, people who need support, who've fallen on hard times." She paused, letting the words land like calculated blows. "And we thought, who better to have as our special guest than you?" One of her friends covered her mouth, shoulders shaking with suppressed giggles. Another turned away, pretending to cough. Claudine stared at the envelope. Gold calligraphy spelled out her name in elegant script. The invitation was beautiful, flawless, and absolutely venomous. "It's white tie elegance," Maria continued, her smile widening. "Very formal. Very exclusive. I'm sure you'll find something appropriate to wear." Her eyes swept over Claudine's faded uniform, lingering with deliberate cruelty. Or not. Either way, it should be memorable. The women couldn't hold it anymore. Laughter burst from them like champagne from shaken bottle. They weren't even trying to hide it now, the mockery, the contempt, the shared understanding that this was theater and Claudine was the unwitting performer. Maria expected something. Tears, maybe. Stammering gratitude. Or better yet, outright refusal. A chance to call Claudine ungrateful, to prove she didn't belong in their world even when invited. Claudine reached out and took the envelope. Her hand didn't shake. Her face remained perfectly still, a mask of composure that gave nothing away. She looked at Maria, then at each woman in turn, her gaze steady and unblinking. "I'll consider it," she said quietly. Not meek, not grateful, just factual. Maria's smile faltered. Just for a second. Confusion flickered across her face. This wasn't the script she'd written. Where was the humiliation? Where was the breakdown? Claudine tucked the invitation into her uniform pocket and picked up her cleaning supplies. She turned and walked away, her cart rolling smoothly beside her, her pace unhurried, unbothered. Behind her, the laughter resumed, but it sounded different now. Uncertain, like they'd missed something important. Claudine's fingers found the envelope in her pocket and held it tight. Not like a joke, like evidence. The apartment was clean. Of course it was clean. Claudine cleaned. For a living, it would have been unbearable if her own space had been anything less than immaculate. But clean didn't mean comfortable. The furniture was secondhand, carefully maintained but worn. The walls were bare except for a single calendar and a clock that ticked too loudly in the silence. Everything had its place. Everything was functional. Nothing was warm. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in her uniform, the invitation resting on her lap like a live grenade. The gold calligraphy caught the light from the single lamp on her nightstand. White tie elegance. Crystal Pavilion. Saturday at 7. It was real, tangible proof that someone had thought enough about humiliating her to spend money on expensive stationery. For a long time, she just stared at it. Then something inside her cracked. The tears came suddenly, violently, like a dam breaking after years of pressure. She pressed her hands to her face, but it didn't stop them. They poured out hot, bitter, unstoppable. Tears for every dismissive glance, every condescending word, every moment she'd bitten her tongue and swallowed her dignity because rent was due and pride didn't pay bills. Tears for the life she used to have, for the woman she used to be, for everything she'd lost and couldn't get back. She cried until her throat hurt, until her chest ached, until the well finally ran dry. When she could breathe again, she wiped her face with shaking hands and stared at the invitation through blurred vision. The question formed slowly, painfully, what now? If she went, they'd laugh at her. Maria would parade her around like a rescued pet, proof of her own charitable nature. The guests would whisper, point judge. She'd be the entertainment, the cautionary tale, the punchline. But if she didn't go, they'd still win. They'd laugh about how the invitation scared her away, how she knew her place, how she couldn't even pretend to belong in their world. Either way, they won. Her eyes drifted across the room and landed on the photograph on her dresser. The only photograph she'd kept out. Her daughter, Amara, age 16, laughing at something off camera. Beautiful. Brilliant. Gone. Not dead. Just gone. Living somewhere across the country with her father, refusing to speak to Claudine, refusing to forgive her for the scandal, for the humiliation, for not fighting back when everything fell apart. The last conversation echoed in her memory, sharp as yesterday. "Mom, when did you stop fighting?" Amara's voice had been raw with anger and disappointment. "When did you become someone who just takes it, who just disappears?" Claudine had tried to explain about exhaustion, about survival, about picking battles you could win. But Amara hadn't wanted explanations. She'd wanted a mother who fought, a mother who didn't shrink. "You used to save lives," Amara had said, tears streaming down her face. "Now you can't even save yourself." Claudine picked up the photograph, traced her daughter's face with her thumb. 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of being invisible, thinking it was safer that way, thinking if she just stayed small enough, quiet enough, the world would eventually forget what happened and leave her alone. But invisibility wasn't safe. It was erased. She set the photograph down carefully and looked at the invitation again. This time something shifted. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something else stirred. Something old and stubborn and tired of hiding. Maybe it was time to stop disappearing. Maybe it was time they remembered who she really was. The storage closet was in the hallway, small and cramped, filled with boxes she hadn't opened in 7 years. Claudine stood in front of it for a long moment before turning the handle. Dust motes danced in the light as the door swung open. The boxes sat stacked in the back, sealed with packing tape that had yellowed with time. She pulled the first one out, set it on the floor, and tore it open. Medical journals spilled out, their covers glossy even after all these years. The New England Journal of Medicine, The Lancet, Global Health Quarterly. She picked one up, flipped it open, and there was her name in print. Dr. Claudine Baptiste, MD, MPH. An article on mobile medical units in crisis zones. Another on sustainable healthcare infrastructure in post-conflict regions. Her words, her research, her life's work, preserved in ink and paper. The second box held photographs. Claudine in scrubs, surrounded by Haitian children outside a field hospital she'd built with donations and determination. Claudine shaking hands with a UN official, receiving an award for humanitarian service. Claudine with her team doctors, nurses, logistics coordinators, all of them exhausted and triumphant after a successful mission. She looked different in those photos. Purposeful, alive, like someone who mattered. News clippings came next, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Dr. Baptiste brings hope to crisis zones. Medical Network saves thousands in earthquake aftermath. Haitian-American doctor builds legacy of service. The headlines felt like they belonged to someone else, someone from a different lifetime. At the bottom of the third box, wrapped in tissue paper, was the certificate. The Baptiste Medical Network. Established 2009. A framed document with her parents' names listed as inspiration to Haitian immigrants who'd worked multiple jobs to put themselves through medical school, who'd taught her that healing was the highest form of service, that privilege meant responsibility. She held it in her hands and remembered what it felt like to build something meaningful, to be someone who solved problems instead of cleaning up after people who created them. Then she remembered how it all came apart. Marcus, her husband, charming, supportive, always at her side during interviews and galas. Also sleeping with the organization's finance director. Also embezzling funds meant for medical supplies and operational costs. Also leaving Claudine's name on documents he'd forged, transactions he'd authorized, accounts he'd emptied. The lawsuit had been brutal. The media is even worse. Accusations of fraud, mismanagement, negligence. Her denials were drowned out by louder voices asking how she could have been so blind, so careless, so incompetent. The board voted to dissolve the network. Donors withdrew support. Partners disappeared overnight. And Amara, 17 at the time, watching her mother's world collapse on national television. "How could you let this happen?" she'd screamed. "How could you not know? How could you be so stupid?" No amount of explaining helped. Marcus had betrayed them both, but somehow Claudine was the one who carried the blame, the one who lost everything: her reputation, her resources, her marriage, her daughter's respect. She tried to rebuild. I tried to clear her name. But public opinion is a slow-healing wound, and lawyers cost money she doesn't have. Eventually, she stopped trying, changed her name slightly on applications, took whatever work she could find, became invisible. Claudine looked at the photograph of herself standing with world leaders, then at her reflection in the darkened window. Same woman, different life. She whispered to the empty apartment, to the ghosts of everything she'd lost. They have no idea who they're mocking. But maybe it was time they found out. The wallet was leather, worn soft with age, tucked in the bottom of the box beneath old receipts and expired insurance cards. Claudine almost missed it. When she opened it, business cards spilled out relics from another life. Donors, board members, colleagues from conferences she'd keynote. And there, creased but legible, was Peter's card. Peter Okonkwo, Director of Global Operations. A phone number she'd once known by heart. The memory hit her hard. Peter had been her program coordinator, the one who managed logistics while she focused on medical care. He'd been there when the accusations started, when Marcus's betrayal came to light. While everyone else scattered, Peter had stayed. He believed her, defended her, told anyone who'd listened that she'd been set up, that she was innocent. But she disappeared anyway, cut ties with everyone because the shame was too heavy, because she couldn't bear to see disappointment in the eyes of people who'd once respected her. She stared at the card for 20 minutes before pulling out her phone. Her hand shook as she dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe he'd changed numbers. Maybe he wouldn't remember her. Maybe. Hello. His voice. Older, perhaps, but unmistakably Peter's. Claudine's throat closed. She almost hung up. "Hello," he said again. "Who is this?" She forced the words out. "Peter? It's Claudine. I need help. And maybe it's time I stopped running." Silence. Long enough that she thought the call had dropped. Then, "Claudine." His voice cracked on her name. "My God, where are you?" I'm in the city. Still here. I've been here the whole time. I'll be there tomorrow." No hesitation. No questions. Just immediate, protective certainty. "Text me your address. I'll be there first." He arrived at 9 in the morning, stepping out of a car that announced success before he even opened his mouth. Tailored suit. Confidence dried. But when he saw her standing in the doorway of her tiny apartment, all that polish fell away. His face crumpled. "You disappeared," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I looked everywhere. Called hospitals. Shelters. I thought." He stopped, shook his head. "I thought something terrible had happened to you." Claudine felt tears threatening again. "I was ashamed. I couldn't face anyone. Everyone thought I was a fraud, a criminal. I didn't know how to." Peter crossed the distance between them and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened at first, then collapsed into it, 7 years of isolation breaking against his shoulder. "You should have called," he whispered. "You should have trusted me." "I know." They sat at her small kitchen table, and she told him everything. The job at Sterling and Associates. The invisibility. Maria's cruelty. The invitation was designed to humiliate her. Peter listened, his jaw tightening with each detail. When she finished, he leaned back and crossed his arms. "So let me get this straight," he said slowly. "They invited you to mock you. They think you're just some janitor with no history, no credentials, no power." "Yes." A smile spread across his face, not kind, not gentle, but sharp and strategic. "Then we're not just getting you to that gala, Claudine. We're reminding the world who you are." He reached across the table and gripped her hand. Dr. Baptiste is about to make a comeback. Peter's network descended on Claudine's apartment like a task force with a singular mission. A stylist named Gabrielle arrived first, carrying garment bags and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from dressing people who change the world. Behind her came Laurent, a designer whose work had appeared in museums, and Maya, a strategist who specialized in what she called narrative reclamation. "We're not giving you a makeover," Gabrielle said firmly, setting down her bags. "We're restoring what was always there." They spread options across Claudine's bed, each gown more stunning than the last. But it was the one at the end that made everyone stop talking. Gold and black, with intricate patterns that echoed traditional African textiles reimagined through modern tailoring. The bodice was structured, powerful. The skirt flowed like liquid confidence. It wasn't trying to fit into their world. It was announcing its own. "This one," Claudine said quietly. Laurent smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. Gold and black. Royalty and strength. Your heritage and your future in one piece." Maya stepped forward, her voice thoughtful. "This isn't about competing with them, Dr. Baptiste. It's not about proving you belong in their space. It's about reminding yourself who you've always been, someone who never needed their approval in the first place." The transformation took hours, but it never felt like construction. It felt like excavation. Each choice was deliberate, meaningful. Hair pulled back in an elegant style that honored her natural texture while commanding attention. Makeup that enhanced rather than masked, highlighting the strength in her features, the intelligence in her eyes. Jewelry that meant something. Her mother's pearl earrings, given her the day she graduated medical school. A slim gold bracelet her father had worn, engraved with the Haitian proverb he'd lived by. "Many hands make the load lighter." Peter watched from the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When Gabrielle stepped back to assess her work, he spoke quietly. "You're not nervous?" Claudine met his eyes in the mirror. "Should I be? Most people would be. Walking back into a world that rejected you. Facing people who think they destroyed you." She smoothed the fabric of her gown, felt its weight, its presence. "I'm not performing, Peter. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm just returning." "To what?" "To myself." Gabrielle turned Claudine toward the full-length mirror. For a moment, no one spoke. The woman looking back wasn't the janitor who'd scrubbed floors and swallowed insults. But she wasn't someone new either. She was Dr. Claudine Baptiste, humanitarian, healer, daughter of immigrants who'd taught her that dignity couldn't be stripped away by circumstance. She'd forgotten that for 7 years. Let the world's judgment become her identity. Let shame eclipse everything she'd built. But standing there in gold and black, she remembered. "They have no idea what's about to walk through that door," Maya said softly. Peter smiled. "No, they really don't." Claudine touched her mother's earrings, feeling the weight of legacy and choice. Tomorrow night, she'd walk into that gala. Not as their punchline, not as their charity case. As herself. Finally, completely, unapologetically herself. "Let's show them," she said. The Crystal Pavilion lived up to its name. Chandeliers dripped light like frozen waterfalls. Marble floors gleamed beneath arrangements of white roses that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided through the crowd, carrying champagne that sparkled in crystal flutes. Every surface reflected wealth back at itself. A hall of mirrors where privilege admired its own reflection. Maria stood at the center of it all, champagne in hand, surrounded by her usual circle. Her dress was white, strategic, bridal, designed to ensure she remained the focal point. She laughed at something someone said, but her eyes kept drifting toward the entrance, scanning, waiting. "I wonder if she'll even show," she said to the woman beside her, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. The invitation probably scared her away. Some people know when they're out of their depth. Her friends tittered obligingly. Maria sipped her champagne, satisfied. Either way, she won. If Claudine came, Maria would have her entertainment. If she didn't, Maria could spend the evening recounting how the poor janitor had been too intimidated to accept charity. Outside, a sleek black car pulled smoothly to the curb. The chauffeur stepped out, moved to the rear door, and opened it with practiced precision. First came his shoes. Gold heels, elegant and deliberate, touching the red carpet with quiet authority. Then the dress emerged, flowing black and gold fabric that caught light and commanded it, patterns that spoke of heritage and power woven into modern sophistication. Claudine stepped out. The air changed. She stood for a moment, poised and radiant, letting the world adjust to her presence. The gown moved with her like it had been designed for this exact moment, this exact woman. Her shoulders were back, her chin lifted. Every inch of her posture announced, I belong here. I have always belonged here. She began walking, not hurrying, not hesitating. Each step measured, powerful, impossible to ignore. Photographers who'd been idly chatting suddenly raised their cameras. Instinct told them what their minds were still processing. This was someone. Flashes erupted like fireflies, capturing her ascent up the red carpet. Questions called out. Who are you wearing? What's your name? But she didn't pause, just smiled slightly and kept moving. The entrance to the ballroom stood before her. Claudine stepped through. A hush felt like a curtain dropping. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned in synchronized fascination. The room had been buzzing with the particular energy of wealthy people celebrating their own generosity, but now it held its breath. Who is that? Someone whispered. The whisper rippled outward, carried on champagne-sweetened breath from guest to guest. People pulled out phones reflexively, ready to identify this woman who'd walked in like she owned not just the room, but the very concept of arrival. Maria's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes widened. Confusion flickered across her face at first because the woman walking toward her looked nothing like the janitor in the faded uniform. Then recognition began to dawn, slow and terrible, like watching a car crash in reverse. No, it couldn't be, but it was. Claudine moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, guests parting instinctively to let her pass. She didn't rush toward Maria, didn't announce herself, just existed fully and completely in a space that had been designed to make her feel small. Maria's face completed its transformation, confusion morphing into recognition, morphing into pure, undiluted horror. The janitor had arrived, but this wasn't a janitor at all. This was someone else entirely. Claudine moved through the crowd like water, finding its course unhurried, inevitable, impossible to redirect. Guests stepped aside without realizing they were doing it, their conversations faltering as she passed. She wasn't performing with confidence. She was simply inhabiting herself fully, and the room had no choice but to make space. Maria's heels clicked sharply against marble as she approached, her smile brittle as cracked porcelain. She'd recovered enough to remember her role, to slip back into the performance of gracious hostess, confronting an amusing surprise. Well, Maria said, her voice carrying just far enough. You actually came, and you cleaned up nicely. The nearby guests turned to watch, sensing the theater. Claudine met her eyes with gentle calm. Yes, I've had practice making things presentable, though some things can't be polished like intentions. The words landed soft but lethal. Maria's face flushed. A few guests exchanged glances, the tension suddenly palpable. Maria opened her mouth to respond, but a voice cut through from across the room. My God, Claudine! An older man pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of shock and recognition. Senator Richard Williams, a fixture at events like this, stopped 3 feet from Claudine and stared like he was seeing a ghost. Dr. Claudine Baptiste? The room pivoted. Every conversation died. Every eye turned. You know her? Someone whispered. The senator's eyes were wet. Know her? His voice cracked with emotion. She ran the medical operation that saved my nephew's life in Port-au-Prince after the earthquake. She's a legend. The word hung in the air like a detonation. Phones emerged from purses and pockets. Fingers flew across screens. Dr. Claudine Baptiste, humanitarian, they typed. Search results loaded. Images appeared. Claudine in field hospitals, Claudine shaking hands with UN officials, Claudine receiving humanitarian awards, Claudine surrounded by the children and families she'd saved. The revelation spread like wildfire through dry grass. Whispers became murmurs, became urgent conversations. That's her. The Baptiste Medical Network, I donated to them years ago. She was nominated for a humanitarian award. Maria's world tilted violently. No, she's just she's. Walter appeared at his wife's side, his face carved from confusion and growing dread. Maria, what is he talking about? Who is this woman? Claudine turned to face them both, her voice steady and clear enough for everyone to hear. I was invited here tonight to be your entertainment, your cautionary tale. Someone you could point to and say, look how far people can fall. The room fell absolutely silent. But here's what you didn't know. Falling isn't the same as failing. And being invisible doesn't mean you're worthless. She paused, letting the words settle. I've spent 7 years cleaning your offices, listening to your conversations, watching you treat people like they're disposable because they don't wear the right clothes or carry the right titles. She looked directly at Maria. You invited me here to embarrass me. Instead, you've exposed yourself. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then someone began to clap. Slow at first, tentative. Then another joined. Then another. The applause built like a wave, spreading through the ballroom until it filled every corner with sound. Maria stood frozen, mortified, her face drained of color. She backed away, stumbling slightly in her white heels. Walter's face had turned to stone, his jaw clenched as he processed what his wife had done, what she'd exposed them both to. The crowd parted for Claudine again. But this time, it wasn't confusion or curiosity. It was respect. Pure, undeniable respect. She walked through them like a queen returning from exile, pulled Maria aside with a grip that made her wince. His voice stayed low, but every word carried the weight of consequences. Do you understand what you've done? Maria's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. She tried to pull away, but Walter held firm. Around them, the gala had transformed. What was meant to be her triumph had become her public humiliation. Guests weren't looking at her with admiration anymore. They were looking at her with something far worse. Pity mixed with contempt. Meanwhile, people surrounded Claudine like she was holding court. Dr. James Chun, director of Metropolitan General, approached with his hand extended. Dr. Baptiste, if you're ready to rebuild, we're ready to support you. What you accomplished before, what you could accomplish again, this city needs that. The world needs that. Others nodded in agreement. A woman in an elegant emerald gown stepped forward. Patricia Holbrook, whose foundation funded healthcare initiatives across 3 continents. Her eyes were bright with conviction. The Baptiste Medical Network should never have closed. What happened to you is a travesty. But if you're willing to start again, we'll make sure you have the resources, the backing, everything you need. Claudine felt tears spill down her cheeks, no longer able to hold them back. These weren't tears of shame or pain. They were something else entirely, grief and hope tangled together. I didn't think the world wanted it anymore, she whispered. I didn't think anyone remembered. Peter materialized at her shoulder, solid and certain. The world needs it, Claudine. His voice was fierce. And it needs you. An hour later, they stood outside on the pavilion steps. The night air was cool against Claudine's skin. Behind them, music and laughter still floated from the gala, but it felt distant now, like something from another lifetime. The city stretched before them, lights scattered across the darkness like promises waiting to be kept. Peter leaned against the car, hands in his pockets, watching her. So, he asked quietly, what now? Claudine turned back toward the crystal pavilion one last time. Through the windows, she could see Maria standing alone, Walter's back to her as he spoke with guests. She could see the people who'd spent years walking past her like she was invisible, now desperately trying to remember if they'd ever been kind. Then she turned forward, toward the city, toward everything waiting beyond this moment. Now, she smiled, and it reached all the way to her eyes. Now I stop cleaning other people's messes and start healing again. Peter's grin was immediate and bright. Dr. Baptiste is back. Claudine shook her head gently, touching the pearl earrings her mother had given her. No, Dr. Baptiste never left. She just forgot for a while. The chauffeur opened the door. They slipped inside, and the car pulled away from the curb, merging into the flow of evening traffic. Through the window, Claudine watched the pavilion grow smaller, then disappear. They say you can't go home again. But sometimes, home isn't a place you return to. It's not a building or a title or a moment frozen in time. Sometimes home is who you are when no one's watching. It's the truth that lives in your bones, the calling that pulses through your veins, the dignity that survives even when everything else is stripped away. That part of you, the essential core, can never be taken. Not by betrayal, not by scandal, not by years of silence and survival. It can be buried, forgotten, hidden beneath layers of shame and necessary compromise. But it never dies. It waits, patient and permanent, for the moment you're ready to remember. If this story moved you, share it, because someone out there needs to hear it. Someone is living small when they were built for significance. Someone has forgotten who they are. Help them remember.